Hi, dreamers. Thank you for learning with us today on Dream Speak. I'm Rika,
And I'm Thomas.
and this is the podcast about dreams that teaches you a complete system to help you listen to your dreams and get the guidance they're providing you every day.
The dream we have for you today has a surprising message. What at first looks like abandonment turns out to be about growth and maturity. Without further ado, Baton, Twirling, and a former boss. I had a dream that I was at a football stadium at night, and I'm a school teacher, so I was there with one of my former bosses, a school principal who I look up to a great deal. And I and he were chaperoning a bunch of students while they competed in a tournament. The tournament was kind of like baton twirling, but as is often the case with dreams where you don't have a lot of awareness that you're bringing to bear. And the first clue of that is that it's at night. I know they weren't actually baton twirling. They were doing some sort of a sport, an event that is about choreography and team choreography, but it doesn't exist in real life. It was just some sort of dexterity, rhythm, dance type of thing that's done in teams. So let me set the scene for you. The stadium was like a normal football stadium. There were bleachers for spectators. We were on kind of a large elevated stage or dais. When the judges called them down to compete, they would make their way down to the stage level, and then they'd be spectated by the people in the bleachers opposite. This was like a tournament extravaganza kind of thing. Earlier in the day, when it was still daylight, there had been a football game. So all these people had come out for a football game and then this tournament of this dance event. And my boss and I were chaperoning these kids that were competing. I remember after a team or two competed, it was like everybody was kind of done and we were waiting for results. I was just kind of getting impatient. And I think the kids were sort of at the end of their patience. I remember saying to myself that we had been there from the morning about 10 a.m. and it was already about 6 p.m. at this point. Some of the kids got up and they asked to go and scatter through the bleachers because they had friends from other schools that they wanted to sit with. And instead of keeping them organized and keeping them together, I just kind of passively assented and they just wandered off. And I was feeling a little downbeat. I just couldn't believe that we'd been waiting hours and hours for results and they hadn't even called the game yet, which is just, that doesn't make any sense. But we hadn't heard the results of the football game either, and we were still waiting. And at that point, I looked around and realized that my former boss was gone. And the only other detail I remember from this dream is that the football field, which hadn't been used for hours, had some spotlights on it, but they were like part of a light show. So it wasn't just traditional spotlights. There were also spotlights that were just rings, and they were multicolored and white lights. So it was basically decorative. It was like they had been used during some sort of a performance down on the field or during the football game, probably more likely for a performance. And then they were just left turned on to kind of decorate the field. So, Rika, what comes to mind for you right away in terms of looking at the symbols and things that are important in this dream?
Well, first of all, it's happening at night, so that usually means there's a lack of awareness in your dream. So there's something that you don't have a lot of clarity on right now, and you need to get some clarity around.
And then my former boss is going to be important in this, I'm sure, because when he disappeared, that had kind of an emotional resonance to it, made me feel a little insecure. And that's always an indicator of it, an important element in the dream when the emotional tenor of a situation changes. The football stadium, the setting, what else?
There were a lot of students, so those
Students.
represent aspects that are developing in you.
Right. Aspects that are supposed to be focused on learning. And they were kind of losing their patience, weren't they? What else? The element of competition, both in the football game and the choreography competition. So there's a sense of looking at the world through that lens, looking at the situation, something in my life I'm looking at as a competition right now, whether that's for good or for ill.
There's also the element of time, a long passage of time in your dream. And in dreams, when time passes, that is connected to our understanding of something over time.
As time appears to pass, our understanding of an issue is growing or changing somehow. We could probably just dive into interpreting the dream right there, because what's really salient as I feel my feelings in this dream, I feel a lot of impatience, and there's an urgency to develop some understanding, but I'm not. It's kind of like everything in this dream is just about being in a holding pattern. And that's really all I need to take from it, is the idea that there is something that I need to learn, some growth that I might need to be doing, something that I need to be maybe a bit more proactive about in my life. And instead, I'm kind of feeling like life in this particular situation is happening to me. I'm not really in control. And so that's where that impatience is rooted. And I think I have felt a bit of impatience. I think what that's probably coming from, just as the symbols in this dream would sort of imply, is my work. Since I'm an educator, we've got symbols of an educational setting here and another educator working with me and students. It's got to do with the fact that I've already had a fairly long career. And sometimes in my industry, it feels like you're taking steps sideways or steps backwards or forwards, or it's a pretty chaotic industry overall, but it has great rewards. And I'm having a wonderful school year. And so I think it's about changing that perspective, just continuing to be deeply engaged in my work in the classroom and not feel like I'm waiting for something new. Just enjoy the day-to-day lessons that I'm teaching, my interactions with the students. And that would make sense, because that's the message that I was getting when this job started. But now it's second semester. And after winter break, teachers tend to let down a little bit. And I think that this dream is urging me on. Another reason that I think that has to do with my former boss, because he has probably been the most important mentor I've ever had. And I always really admired his energy level. He's a person that just has a lot of vitality, and he brought a tremendous amount of energy to the school where he was a school leader. And I liked it. People liked being around him. He was very disciplined with the kids, but really kept them on the straight and narrow, kept them learning every day. And I think that this dream shows me in that key moment when he disappears and I let the kids just kind of disperse into the crowd, I was having second thoughts about that. I really don't think I should have done that. These are aspects of myself, and I need to continue their learning. I need to continue bringing up, so to speak, these parts of me that are learning and growing through my work, through my teaching this year, and not let them get lazy. And I need to be the leader in this situation. I'm relying on my old boss to be taking the lead. But I think the core message of this dream is the fact that I need to be the one taking the lead and not relying on others to kind of show me the way anymore. I'm too far along in my career and my life to behave like that.
It seems like a great analysis.
What other elements of this have we not looked at yet?
Well, the unusual activity that the kids were doing, it's not something that is actually a real thing.
Mm-hmm.
The baton twirling, but it wasn't baton twirling.
Yeah, I don't know what they were doing, maybe with length of rope, or I'm really not sure.
Yeah, so what does that symbolize?
It's really a good question, because after interpreting so many dreams over the years, I know that things like this, these unusual, uncanny symbols, are trying to call our attention. The problem is I don't exactly remember what it was, but it could be something positive, like this large group of aspects of myself is learning something meaningful, or it could be something that is kind of indicating a bit of a waste of time. And it's a little hard to make that distinction just because my memory is a bit vague of the dream. But with things that give me clues are the fact that I have very positive attitudes about team choreography sports. I think it's a wonderful thing to do. I was in marching band and I really loved that. If there was one thing in high school I think I loved the most, that was probably it. So because of my personal reflections on that, I feel like these kids were getting a rich experience that bonded them together. Now, whether there was really any value in that activity that led to them being bonded together, I'm not sure. And it's a little difficult for me to connect that back to waking life. It does make me wonder if this could be a symbol of something that's ultimately a bit futile. But I want to hold on to that feeling of that bonding. These are students at one school, they're being bonded together. That means that they can achieve more. They can do more together as a group, and adults have been guiding them and they've been getting good enough to compete. All of those things are good. So I would guess intuitively that that probably has to do with my first semester of work, that I have kind of gotten a bunch of parts of myself deeply engaged and cooperating and making forward progress in terms of the way that I'm impacting my students this year as a teacher. I still don't know what they were doing with the floppy rope. We may never know. You don't always figure out everything.
Not always. Stay with us because after the bell, we'll be taking you behind the dreams. Welcome back. This is Behind the Dreams, where we share the secrets we use every day to understand our dreams. So, how are you going to use what you've gained in understanding from this dream in your life?
It's a great question. It's interesting to me because I think, broadly speaking, a lot of dream messages are just telling us where to direct our willpower. And ultimately, a great deal of the guidance we receive at night is about mindset and how we approach our days and how we spend our life. And I think what I'm going to do is just show up in my classroom with the same kind of energy and urgency that I had in the first semester. I think this is a bit of a corrective dream. And I think when I get into situations with kids where they really need some guidance, but it's a little bit of a tricky situation or an ambiguous situation, I'm going to try to step forward a little bit more rather than stepping back. I do just want to highlight before we close this dream that we haven't talked about the fact that my boss in this dream represents something called a superconscious aspect. Every person in a dream is an aspect of me. They're not the person. This has nothing to do with my former boss. It only has to do with how I perceive him. And he's kind of like a borrowed vocabulary word that walks and talks. And what he's representing in this dream is mentorship, leadership, energy, qualities that I'd want to emulate in my career. And then he disappeared. The reason that he's different than the students is because he was an employer. When you have somebody who plays an institutional leadership role or a role of power and prestige in society, like a doctor or a boss, in many cases, they're going to be a superconscious aspect. And this is one of those cases. So rather than just representing a part of myself, my former boss represents an aspect of how I'm looking at the universe itself. So how am I relating to this universe? How am I relating to my sense of what is divine and the sense of order or disorder in the world around us? And what this attitude that I have towards my boss shows me is that I'm feeling like the universe kind of needs to handhold me, because that's kind of what he did. He was great at training me. He didn't handhold me, but he was just always there. And whenever anything complicated came up, he was already handling it. And so I learned a ton from just shadowing him, but I never really got out of that role of shadowing him. And when he disappeared in this dream, what that really spoke loudly to me was the universe is putting me forward to develop my own style of leadership and my own unique qualities to be the most impactful teacher that I can without help. That I'm at this stage of my career where I'm in the middle. I'm not at the beginning by anybody's definition. And it's time for me to be that person. And so him disappearing on me wasn't a bad thing. The message here is that I was perceiving that as a bad thing. And that attitude is limiting me. So what I want to do instead, to elaborate on what was being said before, is I want to change my mindset and decide that I am capable of taking on these tough jobs around my school and just dive in and do them. So feel encouraged. My life has led to this point. I have confidence enough in myself that I'm getting a message in my dream that I don't need this part of me anymore. This part that's kind of been giving me outside sources of energy and extra support and help. Those supports are being removed at this phase of my life. And this dream is showing me that that's appropriate and that it's timely and that I've learned enough to take that role on myself. And so that's what I intend to do.
You can find this podcast on all popular streaming services. Connect with DreamSpeak for even more learning. Our socials are in the description. Check out our YouTube channel for a free introductory dream course. Submit a dream at dreamspeak.us. Our theme music was composed by me, Rika. This podcast does not constitute medical advice. If you have concerns about your well-being, talk to your doctor or a mental health professional.